Hey there, and welcome to the Divorce Planner Podcast. I'm divorce prep coach Alex Beatty. If you're a dad navigating divorce, you know the challenges are different than what most people talk about. How do you advocate for equal parenting time? What happens to your finances if you're the primary breadwinner? How do you create a parenting plan that works with a demanding work schedule? Today, I'm talking to family law attorney Bill Farias about the real hurdles fathers face during divorce. We dive deep into the biggest misconceptions about fathers in divorce, how to advocate for equal parenting time, what higher earning dads need to know about child and spousal support calculations, the common mistakes fathers make that can cost them time with their kids, and more. If you're a dad going through divorce or know a dad who is, this episode will help you understand your rights and advocate effectively for yourself and your kids. Let's dive in. I've never really covered this subject before. So a lot of the conversations that I have with different divorce professionals, I've even gone into specific ones about how stay-at-home moms can prepare for a divorce. But a really overlooked segment, I think, of the population is our dads going through a divorce. And there are a lot of false narratives out there about divorce as a whole, but then there are that many more about each gender, trying to paint women as like gold diggers, or if you've been a stay-at-home mom, that she's lazy, or the flip side for men has really been things like, he's just a Disneyland dad, he's not a serious parent, or he doesn't want full time with the kids anyway, or quite frankly, that family court is geared towards only supporting women. So part of our conversation today not only is to give you meaningful information, but to kind of dispel all of that and really get to the nitty gritty of what we're talking about. I have a couple questions prepared, so I'm just going to jump right in. So I already laid it out. What would you say in your work are some of the biggest misconceptions dads have going into divorce that kind of hurts them the most?
Well, I think number one is along the lines of what you were saying, that there are many dads that go into the process thinking that they are necessarily at a disadvantage just because they are male. And I think what this comes from is, decades ago, when there weren't as many women in the workforce, there was a more traditional kind of breakdown in roles where it was mostly men who were the breadwinners and women were rearing children and taking care of the home. But it hasn't been that way for a long time. And judges are aware of that and cognizant of the fact that we are in different times and that it's much more common for fathers to play significant roles in the lives of their children. There are obviously many more women working now, and they're at work just like dads, and vice versa, and both are doing what they can in many of these families to do what's best for the children and play meaningful roles. So what I would say is it's very important to understand that a lot of this thinking and mindset comes from what was happening a long time ago, and that it's not the reality, and judges understand that, and judges do their best to look at every case individually and really drill down to figure out what role have these parents played, how bonded are they to the children, what are their schedules, and what's really in the best interest of the children, and that for the most part that inquiry is gender neutral.
First of all, I love that what you're putting out there is yes, there have been these narratives out there that are based on really old models, like societal models of how spouses function within a family. So I think the headline of what you're saying for any of our dads out there is don't let those old ideas get stuck in your head. This gets to be whatever you want it to be, and whatever kind of father you are is the headline. And when you're going in to see your attorney, like Bill, that you're going in and really kind of laying out what your priorities are in terms of parenting so that you are driving that conversation. But don't go in with this automatic idea that you're coming from behind already, because that's just a self-imposed thing. And you don't want to continue that just by acting based on an idea rather than what you're actually experiencing. And then the second part that, what you brought up, which is true, it's child support and alimony are really two things that can terrify a household, especially if there's only been one earner, maybe in that dynamic, another person who's been raising the children. And while 45% of married women who are in the workforce earn just as much, if not more, than men, only 16% are the higher earners. So we're still dealing with some realities in terms of the likelihood of if you're the higher earner and you're the dad, you will probably be looking at some support. But it's hard not to be paralyzed because everything about dealing with money is terrifying. And if you suddenly find yourself supporting two different households after divorce, it can just seem financially insurmountable. And what can dads do to really not just financially survive divorce, but prepare for life after early in this process with you, their attorney?
It's really important to the extent possible to analyze what's best for the children first and then reverse engineer what the money looks like. And I think people get into a lot of trouble when, number one, they come in with these, especially dads, they come in with these preconceptions that I really have no chance. And so I'm just going to agree to this. And it's based on this fear and this old model that they hear repeated. So I think it's important to avoid that and to really drill down, and with the help of someone who is reliable, an attorney who's reliable and is going to be straight with them, analyze the child custody issue and help them figure out if this were to go in front of a judge, what would the likely outcome be? And then once you have an idea of what might happen with the parenting breakdown, then you're in a better position to reverse engineer that and to figure out what does this mean for the financials? Because at that point, you can figure out, you can have a better idea of what a fair money arrangement looks like. And then that'll help dads plan from there in terms of like, now what do I have left over? What can I dedicate to housing? What might have to be used for support? So that's how I would think about it.
I think that's a perfect breakdown. Something that I work with clients on. There is, no better time than the present, right? Than to start crunching these numbers, even if you're just considering a divorce or you've been blindsided by one, or maybe you've got a mediation coming up. At any point, you're not behind. Just start where you are and start crunching the numbers. And what I work with my clients on a lot is we're not only I'm prepping them for divorce negotiations, right? And to kind of be on the ball when it comes to the financial discovery process so that they're handing everything over very clearly so that you, the attorney, can get to work. But as a part of that process, you're educating yourself about not only what your financial realities are now, but then you have an opportunity. I have clients make a copy of our spreadsheet and then make it blank and start using it as a post-divorce projected budget that you can even use while you're going through the negotiation process. Because a lot of times, especially if we are talking about spousal support, it's not a guarantee. All states have different varying laws. And more often than not, it's a part of the negotiation if there is support. So you want to be prepared to see, hey, where am I going to have a shortfall? Maybe where am I going to have a little bit of wiggle room windfall? Way before you get to that step. So I love that answer about really activating, your client, and not to come in again with that preconceived idea, but just when you come to this conversation with your attorney, you are really a team. Like your attorney can only do the best job based on you being kind of your own best advocate and being able to lay things out. And if you have a fear, address that fear up front so that your attorney knows kind of where you need more information and where your priorities are. We'll be back after a quick break. Feeling overwhelmed about the possibility of a divorce and not sure where to start? Book a free 15-minute strategy call with me. During our time, we'll talk about where you are in the process and what next steps could be. To schedule your call and learn more about my coaching program, head over to www.thedivorceplanner.net/coaching. Let's get back to today's episode. When we're talking about kids and figuring out parenting time after divorce, and obviously child support can be a part of that, conversation as well. One of the, I think, loudest false narratives, especially on social media, is that divorce is biased towards women, right? I mean, I think that even just that idea stacks the deck against men, or at least they feel that way. What do you feel that most dads need to know about advocating for equal parenting time? Because I think a lot of dads assume that, well, if it's a stacked against me, I'm just going to like keep my mouth shut and let things kind of play out however they play out.
What I would say is that, first of all, it is important to realistically examine what the role has actually been and what the parenting time breakdown in terms of like responsibility has been. Because that will give you, I think, an important piece of information to help a dad work with a reliable attorney to try to project what might happen in a hearing, and that'll put that individual in a position to negotiate effectively. Sometimes people come to us and they are thinking like money first and they want to reverse engineer. Okay, if mom has full custody, then I'm going to pay this. If it's shared custody, then I'm going to pay less. And therefore, I want shared custody. And that's not how it works. So I think you need to be realistic. And that's not where the analysis ends, because I think there is something to be said for when some dads are splitting, they want to play a bigger role in the lives of children. And if that is genuine, then that is worth pursuing. So I think it's really important to be realistic, to help the attorney understand what the role has been, what your true motives are, what your schedule looks like going forward. And so those are all pieces of the analysis that are going to put dads in a better position to project what might happen and to work with attorneys to come up with a resolution that makes sense for the children and for them.
I love that answer. And it also just made me think about different male clients that I work with. And part of that preparation is you don't have to wait until you get to your mediation to then start figuring out what would that parenting plan look like. Is it a 70-30? Is it a 50-50? Is it 1 week on, 1 week off? I think I'm trying to also like engage the audience to know that they really get to help drive the process. And by putting some thought into it, as you're saying, about like, what are the realities about your schedule, about your work schedule, and maybe your kids' either childcare schedule or their school schedules, right? So taking a look at all of those different factors, as well as your ex's work realities or schedule realities in advance, and then coming to your attorney and saying, hey, here's what I want. Here are scheduling realities. Here's kind of an idea. I thought we could do 50-50 week on, week off. And here's how it would work. Like, I want people to know that you can do that. I think people, again, going back to coming in with either a growth mindset or an open mindset and a fixed mindset applies to this process as well. But I think because of the fact that it's a legal process that you're going through during a highly emotional time, a lot of people forget that they get to be a part of that conversation. So, what would you say, building on that? What happens when a dad gets less parenting time or realizes that they're going to have less parenting time due to work obligations? I've had a lot of dads who I've worked with who, they're under contract, right? They are contractually supposed to be traveling at least once a month, and sometimes it varies. There might be an inconsistency in dates, but a certain amount of time, but you have to like make room for that for your job. How do you fight for time and your relationship with your children when you're kind of more tethered to a schedule that way?
That's a very difficult position to be in, because it is difficult to convince a judge to accept a schedule that is not in line with what's been practiced. So in other words, I think most judges will look at, okay, what have these people been doing? How have they been parenting this child? And that is a significant factor in figuring out what's in the child's best interest and what should happen moving forward. So it's not that it can't be done. Like, I have had cases before where we've gone before judges and said, okay, this has been dad's schedule, but now these parties are splitting and he wants to play a more meaningful role. And these are the adjustments that he has to make at work. And this is what it's going to mean financially. Again, I think the judge has to believe that it's genuine, that it's not just I'm cutting back because I don't want to pay as much. It can be done, but there is a balance. I think both things are true. The judge is going to consider what the arrangement has been. And if somebody has been working a lot and they haven't been there a lot, then that's something the judge has to consider, right? Because that means usually that the other parent has played a bigger role, and that's a significant factor. And on the other hand, I do think that judges recognize that adjustments are made when people split up. And so there is some room for negotiations. There is some room for pushing back a little bit to try to get some more time.
I definitely agree with you in terms of like whatever the reality of your schedule has been and within the marriage, what your designated roles have been is already the framework. And obviously, that, as you said, does change with divorce. But by paying attention to those realities, and if you do want more time and that's not something you were able to have before, taking a look at how can you practically set it up in advance of presenting what you want the ideal parenting time to look like, solve the problem. Already solve the problem of either like my schedule has been really inconsistent or I'm always at the beck and call of work. Tackle those issues before you present the schedule. And you're going to have that much more likelihood that you're going to get the outcome you want in terms of that parenting time split. So that's super important. I love that you pointed that out.
What you see more and more now is more flexibility from employers and work from home. And so there are people that are able to take advantage of that, like in advance of a hearing, in advance of negotiations. And it's legitimate, where before they couldn't be around to put the child on the bus, pick the child up. So I think it's really important to explore those options, get what you can in place to sort of optimize the time that you have available for parenting. And that's something that the court will absolutely consider.
I love this idea also of what it has been doesn't mean that's what it will be. It depends on what are your intentions, what are the realities, what can you actually make work, and then you can build towards that. We'll be right back after a quick break. Subscribe to the Divorce Planner's weekly newsletter and get divorce prep tips, financial planning tools, and expert insights delivered discreetly to your inbox. Sign up at www.thedivorceplanner.net. Let's get back to today's episode. The way that I prepare people in my work is you have to project manage your divorce, right? And so being able to kind of break things down into those same steps as you're going through even this process. I work with parents on part of the preparation process is looking at your schedule. What are the realities and putting together parenting points to be able to propose. And I know every time, Bill, you're saying things that a judge is going to approve that we want to make sure a judge is going to say, just for clarity for everybody who's, listening, there are multiple ways that the judge is going to see your judgment. When Bill says that, he doesn't mean you're automatically going to court and standing in front of a judge and arguing things out. Even if you're mediating, right? Whatever judgment you come up with, in the end, even if you sign off and your spouse, a judge is going to have to stamp it, right? So don't think you're going to be standing in court because, quite frankly, I think hopefully I could speak for you, Bill, but our goal is to keep you out of court. We want you to have as much say over the outcome of your divorce as possible. And like I said, whether that is a mediation where you have a designated mediator, or maybe your attorney, Bill, is going back and forth with your soon to be ex's attorney, it's still just all the final paperwork has to be run by the judge. That's what he's talking about. Let's talk about the elephant in the room, which I think doesn't get talked about a lot. It's like, what if our dad is the primary caregiver? What if the roles have been reversed in terms of who the primary breadwinner or the high earner is? Does being a stay-at-home dad change the custody or financial picture significantly? What can a stay-at-home dad expect when he's navigating this process?
I mean, I think a stay at home dad can, at this point, expect just about the same as what a stay at home mom can expect. And it goes to what I described earlier, which is that we are in different times. And for the most part, these issues are gender neutral. So I do think that despite this misconception that the family law courts are biased in favor of moms, that the reality is that most judges are good people and take pride in what they do and are legitimately and genuinely trying to do what's in the best interest of the children. So, what I would say is do not let the fact that you are a stay at home dad deter you from pushing for what's in the best interest of the children and what's going to put you in a position to thrive financially and to maintain stability for you and the children.
Oh, I think that's a great answer. And it's true. It's like this gets to be whatever you want it to be. Meaning, if you're playing roles that you don't see always reflected, maybe in society or pop culture, that doesn't mean that they're wrong. They're what work. Each family figures out what works for them. And when you're coming from a place of putting children's best interests first, dealing with the realities of each parent, each spouse's whether it's a work obligation, but also what their abilities are and kind of being clear eyed in that as well, leaning into what people can do and not waiting for them to do things they just can't. You're setting yourself up for more success as a co parent that way and navigating, figuring out what your custody is going to be with your children during this entire process because at the end of the day the goal is for there to be two happy parents on the other side. This process itself is not a happy one. It's like there's no worse time in your life to go through a legal process than when you're going through a huge life change that's very emotionally triggering, which is why I'm always saying ad nauseum, like there's an emotional side to this process and there's a business side, and you need to separate the two while you're addressing them both at the same time because you don't want those big feelings making lasting decisions for you while you're really going through this partnership dissolution. Really, that's all it is. And I'm just going to wrap things up with what I hope is going to be a helpful kind of little tidbit to leave for anybody who is out there navigating a divorce as a dad. And that is, Bill, what is one piece of advice you wish every dad going through a divorce could hear before they started the process?
I would say do not underestimate your chances of getting a fair parenting arrangement that works for you and the children. I think along the lines of what you mentioned earlier, there are a lot of dads that go into the process with this defeatist attitude that they are definitely going to lose. And what we see often is that they will agree to arrangements that they don't really want, that they don't really feel is in the children's best interests. And they put themselves at a significant disadvantage because it's important to know that it is not easy to modify parenting plans later on. People have this misconception that, and they hear this from mediators, from people who want to try to be helpful and give some advice, but you can take care of that later. You can always add more time later. And unfortunately, it is not that easy. So I do believe in trying to resolve cases amicably. We do our best to help people work around the court system to get where they need to be. And there is also a component to this that you only have one chance to establish this parenting foundation. So don't sell yourself short. Really take a look at and assess what's in the best interest of the children. And don't be afraid, as long as your motives are genuine and you are trying to do what's best for the children, don't be afraid to go after that.
I love that answer. I'm like smiling my face off right now because at the heart of all of this is, just because you're going through a divorce doesn't mean the family is ending. Your responsibility isn't ending. Your co parenting journey isn't ending. The family is just changing shape, right? But this is an opportunity to really model some behavior for your kids, because the truth of the matter is what you can expect is the unexpected constantly. Life is more of an up and down situation. It's not just this steady stream, slow and steady. So even by navigating this as a parent and showing your kids how you are going through this, how you're still communicating with the other parents, and the time and the thought you put into helping build a parenting plan that really works for everybody from the get-go, as you said, Bill, is your best bet. And, if I can offer anything else, it's just think of the old measure twice, cut once. That's what you want to do. And if you have young kids, that means that you're going to have to anticipate a lot of different stages along the way. It's not so difficult. I actually have had a podcast episode with Samantha Boss, who is a high conflict parenting plan expert that's got a lot of tips and tools for anybody listening. But thank you so much for joining me for this really important conversation about dads navigating divorce.
Thank you, Alex.
That's a wrap on today's episode. I hope you found it helpful. For more free resources, check out my blog at www.thedivorceplanner.net/blog. You'll find articles on how to emotionally and financially prepare for divorce, gain insights into the process from divorce experts, and empower yourself with tips and tools that make your divorce journey easier. And you can follow me on Instagram at the.divorce.planner, on Facebook at Divorce Prep, and on YouTube at The Divorce Planner for daily divorce prep tips and support. I'm Alex Beatty, and this has been the Divorce Planner Podcast. Until next time, remember, divorce is hard. Preparing for one doesn't have to be.